Hi, our topic is why many scientists consider astrology to be a pseudoscience. I'm presenting this from the point of view as an astrologer and a research methodologist. Most of you probably know that I am an astrologer. You may not know that I'm a research methodologist. To give you a sense of some of my background in research methodology and statistics, here's an academic paper by Grace Ann Jackman, Walter Leche, and David Cochran, that's me. And the title of the paper is Estimating Latent Variable Interactions with the Unconstrained Approach, a comparison of methods to form product indicators for large unequal numbers of items. That probably makes your eyes glaze over and sounds very uninteresting and boring, but it's just an example of my participation in the academic community of research methodologists and statisticians. This paper is published in the journal Structural Equation Modeling, a multidisciplinary journal, which is one of the more prestigious journals in research methodology. So as a person who lives inside the astrological community and simultaneously lives inside the community of research methodologists, I want to share with you some of my observations of what I see is going on, and it's a little bit different from what people who are not in both communities often think. Sometimes I hear astrologers talk about why scientists reject astrology, and I think to myself, gee, that's not what I experience when I go to a conference in research methodology or meet with my colleagues and friends who are professors and graduate students in research methodology and statistics. Similarly, I hear scientists would say something about astrology, and I think to myself, that's not what I experience. So as somebody who lives in both camps, I want to share with you some of my conclusions. Number one, I do think that most scientists consider astrology to be a pseudoscience, and I want to tell you why. This is what they tell me. And it's pretty straightforward and obvious, and makes sense if you live in this world of research methodology and science. First of all, there's two parts to this. First part is that the scientists see that we astrologers are making a correlation. In this bottom paragraph, I give examples. We may say Taurus is stubborn, Gemini is curious. We might say transiting Uranus is square natal Mars, and you're inclined to sudden action, anger, maybe even accidents. So there's a correlation of something going on in the sky with some kind of behavior or personality. Correlations can be studied scientifically. Now, the astrologers would sometimes say, well, there's a correlation, but it doesn't always work. It's just a probability. It could be a small probability. That's fine. That's what science is about, the social science, about probabilities. The probability could be small. The astrologers may say, well, it's archetypal, it's not causal, it's synchronistic, it's psychological. They may also say the astrological rules are so complicated, science could never approach the complexity and the number of possible ways that these archetypes could manifest and all the choices and influences. It's way beyond what science can do. Well, that's not true. I mean, as a research methodologist, we often tackle extremely difficult and complex problems with very complicated numbers of variables. So these are not issues, and whether it's a synchronistic or psychological or archetypal doesn't really affect this either. So the first thing about astrology from the point of view of a research methodologist, statistician, or scientist is that we have this idea of some kind of correlation with a greater probability of certain behavior based on certain astrological things. And then the reason why this is considered to be a pseudoscience, when I talk to scientists and I present what's going on in astrology, is not because it seems unbelievable or the history of astrology, or even what astrologers do, or some of these other lame things that they'll say, oh, it's the 13th sign, or they talk about precession of the equinoxes. You'll hear that from some of the superficial cynics of astrology or the uninformed, but once a dialogue is created, that's not the problem. The reason that they'll consider astrology to be a pseudoscience is because of the way we figure out whether astrology works. Generally, what we do in astrology is we base our understanding on personal experience and what we research methodologists call convenient sampling. We do charts of famous people, friends, family, clients. We experience astrology, we live astrology, we speak that language, and it works for us. That's not enough to a scientist. Maybe it is enough. Maybe it's fine. But it doesn't agree with the scientific philosophy. That would be a different philosophy. The philosophy of science is that if you say something that can be measured, such as transiting Uranus, square natal Mars, is going to give a very slight greater inclination to an accident, or anything else, or Gemini's curious, anything, then you're responsible to test that. And you have to use methods that are more rigorous than looking at charts of famous people and clients. I've even heard astrologers say this: "Oh, you don't believe in science? Get your chart done. You never even had your chart done. How can you criticize it? Just get your chart done. You'll believe in astrology." Well, that's not the most important thing either. For a scientist, they may get their chart done. They may be very impressed. What's more important to a scientist is not personal experience. That's saying get more personal experience. No, they don't trust their personal experience as the only, as something to rely on. They want to get a more objective view of it. So here, for example, is something that impresses scientists. Suppose you go through a database and you pick out the charts of whatever astrological thing you interpret. Suppose you say that, Venus is in a water sign, square Neptune, and you could even make the rules more complicated. You could say Venus is ruling the 7th house in a water sign, square Neptune, and therefore you have this personality trait, or maybe it's a forecast. You go through the database, find out all the people that have this thing in common, and then just look at the charts and see if you can make a good argument. You don't have to use statistics. You don't have to get very fancy about it. Just control for bias, as we call it in research methodology, where you don't get to pick the charts. The charts are determined for you with a nice database, and see if the ideas really work. This would really test your ideas much more rigorously. If astrologers do that, then we would not be a pseudoscience. According to modern science, if you make a statement and you don't, that can be tested, which in astrology many astrologers do that. I think the great majority do. And then you don't go through the trouble of actually evaluating whether it's true or not. That is a pseudoscience. You're making claims without testing them carefully. So could we do this? Suppose you think to yourself, gee, I do want to test my ideas. It's a good idea. Could you do it? Well, yeah. The way you would do it would be to get, the best way to do it would be to get the Kepler Series programs, preferably Series 2.0. It comes with a database of over 20,000 charts of famous people with recorded birth times, over 89,000 charts. And you can set up whatever you want to search for, and you can test and see if your ideas work or not. Now, this may sound self-serving and arrogant because I'm one of the developers of the program. I'm in this company. So, boy, do I have a deal for you. Just get my program and all your problems are solved. Like a used car salesman. Oh, this car has never been driven, just sitting in a garage for 10 years. So it may sound like I'm building up this whole thing just to sell you a program, but that's why we added this feature to the program. I didn't add the feature because it's the best marketing thing to do in the world. Customer demand for this kind of features is not as high as for other things, but we did it because it's the right thing to do. Astrology needs it, and we need to move forward. That's why we have the feature. This is all true, in my opinion. This is what we need to do. So the reason why I test my ideas, going through the database to see if they're true, is because for me it helps me better understand how astrology works. I am an astrologer, and I also agree with a lot of the modern ways of thinking and evaluating whether things work, and I do think we make these statements of correlations, and I want to know if they're true. So for me, it helps me understand astrology hugely better than if I did astrology only by convenient sampling and my personal experience of whatever charts I happen to be doing. So that's why I do it. So would scientists respond positively if more astrologers did this? Well, 2 points. Number one, whether scientists would respond positively or not really has nothing to do with whether we should do this or not. We should do it anyway, because it's the right thing to do, at least in my opinion, for the reasons that the scientists say is true, is that we can find out these things work. It's absolutely it's fantastic. I mean, the things that I learn, the speed at which I can develop my understanding of astrology is so fast and incredible because I go through and I test it, and it's fun, it's exciting. I wish more astrologers would do it. We really get to see if the ideas work or not. So even if the scientists continue to reject astrology, if we do more what's called extreme case sampling rather than convenience sampling, it doesn't really matter in terms of what we do. I believe we should do this anyway. Number two, I think it does make a difference. In my personal experience, scientists usually respect and appreciate my work. Sometimes I will talk to astrologers, by email or at a conference or whatever the situation may be, and I'll say, I pulled out, I shouldn't say collected, I pulled out the top 5 or top 10 people in the database who have some astrological thing, and it really works. And they'll say, oh, that's great. And then the conversation may move on to convenience sampling, where the convenience sampling, I have a client, etc., is considered to be just as important, just as strong evidence as the extreme case sampling. So in astrology, we often don't consider this kind of more rigorous approach to testing our ideas important. And that's the big difference between the scientists and many astrologers, is that if I'm talking to a scientist and I say, well, I have 20 charts and I got this result, 20 charts of famous people or my clients, they'll think, oh, that's interesting. But as soon as I say, I did an extreme case sampling study and the top 5 people all had something similar in common, then they get interested, because now I'm speaking their language. So this is the language of science, and this is the issue with astrology. And if you don't like the philosophy of modern science, that's your decision and your way of understanding it. But I just want to share with you what the critical issues that are involved here, and why scientists consider astrology to be a pseudoscience. Okay, so I've got some links here if you want more information. I've got a link here to a video just on extreme case sampling. I've got a link to a video on the Kepler introduction to Kepler and Sirius software. A link also to the full YouTube page of videos, and a link to the website of the company, Cosmic Pattern Software, that makes the Kepler and Sirius software. Okay, my friends, thank you very much for taking your time to listen to this. God bless. Namaste.